Jayna Murray was murdered at a Lululemon in Bethesda, Maryland in March of 2011. But murder in a luxury store wasn't the most shocking news of the week for the affluent community.
It's a murder case that has stunned many here in Maryland and even grabbed national headlines. Jayna Murray was laid to rest this weekend after being killed in the yoga store where she worked. Now in a twist few saw coming.
This newscast aired a week after the attack, and when she says a twist few saw coming, she means no one. So we're going to start from the beginning. This is the story of the Lululemon murder. I'm your host, TD, and welcome to Sick World. Rachel Ertley was a morning manager at Lululemon and arrived a little after 8 a.m. to open the store. She noticed the lights were left on and the door unlocked, which was a little alarming, but this is Bethesda Row, an upscale shopping area, and although mistakes happen, bad things usually don't. Not here at least. After all, this is a wealthy, affluent community known for art and culture, not crime. Thinking the night shift forgot to lock up, Rachel walked inside, and any thought of foul play she had dismissed earlier returned immediately. The store was ransacked, and she heard a voice moaning in pain from somewhere in the back of the store. Frightened, she got herself out as fast as she could. Visibly upset by what she had just seen and heard, Rachel was approached by a concerned man she didn't know outside the Lululemon. His name was Ryan Hoff, and he asked if he could help. Ryan had been waiting in a Black Friday-linked line for the newly released iPad 2 at the Apple store next door, and although he was a stranger, she asked if he would go into the Lululemon with her while she dialed 911. Ryan made his way to the back of the store and found two women badly hurt.
County 911, what is the emergency? There's people in the back of my store. One person's being fed and the other person is breathing. It was open this morning. I think one of my managers came in to open it. Someone tied her up. I need an ambulance right away.
The women found in the back of the store that Saturday morning were both Lululemon employees, and both had been attacked. One was found in the back room, while the other was found tied up, lying on the bathroom floor, but still alive. When authorities arrived, they discovered the body of Jayna Murray, face down in a pool of her own blood. She was unrecognizable. The other employee, Brittany Norwood, was found with her hands zip-tied over her head, cuts all over her body, and her pants were ripped in the groin area. Brittany would later tell police that both she and Jayna were sexually assaulted. The investigation began with the obvious. Money was missing from the safe, and it looked like a robbery gone bad. Police found multiple sets of bloody footprints, one of which belonged to a size 14 male tennis shoe, and there was blood all over the back room where Jayna's body was found. And the exit door was also covered in blood and looked as if someone was running from their attacker, but kept from escaping. There was no shortage of evidence, and the crime scene screamed robbery, but investigators wanted help connecting the dots, so they went to the hospital to visit their only witness and survivor of the attack, Brittany Norwood. And Brittany pretty much confirmed what police found at the crime scene, saying that she and Jayna closed the store the night before around 9 p.m., and they went their separate ways, but she called Jayna and asked her to return to the store when she realized she left her wallet inside the Lululemon and needed her Metro card to get home. So Jayna came back with the keys to open the store a little after 10 p.m. when two men in ski masks followed them inside before attacking, restraining, and sexually assaulting them both. Jayna resisted the sexual assault, and that's when her attackers beat and stabbed her to death. Equipped with evidence from the crime scene and eyewitness testimony from Brittany, the police had a good idea of what happened that night and released a timeline to the public, hoping to drum up new leads and warn the public of the two men at large.
There were lots of people around at the time that a terrible crime happened inside the Lululemon store on Bethesda Avenue Friday night. A timeline released by police indicates employees closed the store at 9 p.m., then set the alarm and locked the door at 9:45. At 10:05 p.m., two female employees returned to pick up a forgotten item. That's when two men wearing ski masks and gloves entered behind them. Another employee found the victims when she arrived to open the store at 8 a.m. Saturday. Police think it was a crime of opportunity, a robbery that turned into rape and murder. 30-year-old Jayna Murray is described as a valiant fighter who would not have hesitated to protect herself and her 27-year-old coworker who was beaten but survived. The crime scene may hold the best leads police have at this point.
We are still in the process of collecting physical evidence and doing forensic analysis. My hope is that in the next few days we may get additional leads as a result of that forensic analysis.
The attack in the heart of downtown Bethesda has residents and the business community on edge.
Police went on a manhunt looking for the assailants. They interviewed people in the area, put up a reward for $125,000 for more information on the masked suspects, and even checked recent ski mask purchases in the area, hoping for any kind of lead, but they came up with nothing.
Nothing really happens around here, and like the fact that that happened here just like that kind of stays in your head.
Later that week, CCTV footage surfaced from the Apple store that neighbored the Lululemon and confirmed Brittany's timeline of events. The two businesses shared a wall, and the footage captured Apple employees listening to the attack next door. They reported hearing approximately 10 minutes worth of yelling, thudding, and grunting. One of the Apple employees, Jayna Troxel, would later testify that she heard a voice saying, "Talk to me, don't do this, talk to me, what's going on?" And then it sounded like something heavy was being hit or dragged, and that there was some high-pitched squealing. Ricardo Rios, the manager of the Apple store, didn't believe anyone needed to call 911, and that it was probably just drama, and apparently the security guard felt the same way as Ricardo, because he just sat there with his headphones in, listening to an iPod throughout the attack.
If I was screaming for help, I would have wanted someone to call the police. It's really a tragedy.
CCTV would also capture two men wearing all black walking past the Apple store after the suspected time of the murder. Police would follow up, but the men were just restaurant workers walking home after their shift. Another suspect the police would look into was a homeless man named Keith Lockett. Keith had a drinking problem and was seen with a second person that night, was found in a hospital with injuries and blood on his clothing, and had a history of violence with charges of robbery, assault, battery, and disorderly conduct. But it turned out that Keith had an alibi. He was in a fight with someone else 6 miles from the Lululemon that night, and the blood on his clothes didn't match Brittany or Jayna's. So, back to square one. Despite having so many leads, the police were never able to find the two assailants, and for good reason. They didn't exist. Police noticed a number of things weren't quite adding up between the evidence they found and the victim who survived. Jayna sustained 8 fractures to her skull and 331 total injuries from at least 5 different weapons, whereas Brittany's wounds were far fewer in number, superficial in nature, and her cuts were all of a similar depth, implying that she wasn't moving when they were inflicted. Another oddity was the men's size 14 shoe found at the crime scene. It was a perfect match for the bloody footprints found on the ground and seemed to be covering Brittany's bloody footprints that were already there. And while the bottom of the men's shoe was fully coated in blood, the inside of the shoe bore the same pattern as the sole of Brittany's, implying that she used it to quite literally cover her tracks. And almost as weird as the attacker leaving his shoe behind is that the shoe belonged to Lululemon, as one used for customers when trying on clothes or doing alterations. In fact, everything involved in the attack was present at the store, from the shoes worn by the assailant to the murder weapons and even the zip ties used to bind the victims. So I guess Brittany wants us to believe that one of the attackers put on store shoes for the robbery and murder before kindly removing them and leaving them behind. So the criminal either changed shoes before and after the attack, or arrived and fled barefoot without being noticed by anyone, which would be quite the feat. And as if that weren't enough, the most puzzling part of Brittany's story had to do with Jayna's car. You see, Jayna's car was found blocks away from the Lululemon, which made no sense, since they would have parked right outside the storefront so late at night. And even stranger was that they found both Jayna and Brittany's blood in the car. But this case has garnered national media attention, and police don't necessarily want to perp walk a supposed victim of sexual assault until they're 100%. So detectives confronted her with some of these, let's call them inconsistencies. And Brittany suddenly remembered a few things that she forgot to tell police earlier. And to her credit, she did her best to fill any plot holes in her story.
Explain to you guys how that night played out. Prior to him sexually assaulting me and zip tying me, they made me move her car. I know where her car is. And they seemed to know where it was, where she was parked.
Okay.
They asked, they said, where are her keys? I have no idea. I don't One of them punched me in my head and made me look through her coat and her bag for them. When I finally found them, they said if I was to pass anyone and open my mouth, I can consider myself dead. And that one of them would be watching the entire time. And I honestly don't remember the exact lot, but they said to, like, I don't know, like, cross, it's almost like on the other side of Wisconsin or something.
Okay.
From that street. I remember seeing a cop and I was just too scared to even flag him down, do anything.
Was that like when you left the store or when you were parked?
When I left the store.
So when you first left the store. Okay.
And he was driving past in his car?
Okay.
Just to clarify, she's saying that her air quote attackers already raped and killed Jayna, but now they need Brittany to move Jayna's car a few blocks away before they can turn their attention on her. Brittany's story is nothing short of absurd, and her fake tears are truly upsetting for none of the reasons that she's intending. Let's break down just how ridiculous this is on every level. First off, her captors just spent the last 2 hours attacking Jayna, but at no point tied Brittany up. I guess she was just super cooperative? No, instead, they waited to tie her up after she drove a car a few blocks away and returned. Secondly, according to Brittany's logic, her attackers thought it would be more dangerous for them if Jayna's car was towed than if they let Brittany walk outside while she's bleeding from her face, give her the keys to Jayna's car, and ask her to move it a few blocks down the street after they had already demonstrated they were murderers and rapists. Who would do this? I guess make-believe people, but that's really about it. Lastly, Brittany witnessed her attackers rape and kill Jayna before she was supposedly given keys to a car, drove 3 blocks away, and saw a cop, but still chose to return for a night of sexual assault and certain death. This makes no sense from her perspective or the attackers. And the craziest thing is that she wasn't even done spinning her lies, because she also needed to explain how it was that Jayna's DNA got into the car, despite them being in separate rooms during the attack.
And how did you fall onto Jayna? I mean, were you on your hands and your knees, or straight down, face down?
On my knees.
Okay. Were you straddling her, or were you actually physically, like, pancaked on top of her, or what?
They pushed me on her. They touched her head.
You touched her head? With what?
And that slid to the ground.
Okay, so your hands got the blood on either side of her?
Yes.
Okay. I know it's hard.
Blood all over.
You had blood all over you? And then what? And what, did he say anything to you when he pushed you down?
It's my fault.
Okay.
This is because of you.
Yeah, Brittany, this is because of you. Probably the first truthful thing she said over the course of the investigation. If you couldn't tell, Brittany's story is crumbling beneath her feet. It made no sense why she returned to the store, why the attackers only used in-store items all the way down to their shoes, and it made no sense why neither Brittany nor Jayna showed any signs of sexual assault, despite an attack that supposedly went on for hours. The games were over, and detectives began to call her out on her story.
Brittany, comes a point sometimes, yeah, we have to break down and get everything off of our chest. You gotta tell us what really happened.
I'm telling you.
Because I know what really happened.
I told you what really happened.
Now, what you've done is you've concocted an incredible story that doesn't make any doggone sense.
No.
With the injuries that you have, they're self-inflicted. Yeah, they're self-inflicted. You did this to yourself. It's incredible that you want me or anyone to believe that you're lying like this overnight, haven't moved. Okay, that's posed. Nobody in the world is going to believe this story. No one. She doesn't believe it. My boss doesn't believe it. When I tell your brother and your sister, they ain't gonna believe it. And your mother and your father, they're gonna say, bullshit. In a little bit, but how did it start? Come on, let's get this over with. Come on, baby, let's get this over with. Nah. Listen, I don't know if they're gonna let you go. Tell me right now. Did you do this? I just want to go for it. I'm not gonna let you go. But you need to tell them so I know how to talk to these guys. Because if you did, we have to get you a lawyer to defend you. And it's gonna be a mediation story. You need to tell me right now who did. I just don't want to talk about it here.
Less than a week after the story broke, the star witness, Brittany Norwood, was arrested and charged with first-degree murder.
It's a murder case that has stunned many here in Maryland and even grabbed national headlines. Jayna Murray was laid to rest this weekend after being killed in the yoga store where she worked. Now in a twist few saw coming, her coworker has been charged with murder. ABC's John Hendren has more on the clues that finally tipped off investigators.
As we began analyzing the forensic evidence and looked at the medical reports, it was not supporting what Ms. Norwood had told us.
Norwood will appear in court tomorrow. Law enforcement experts say police will be combing through her past, looking to make sure nothing like this has ever happened to anyone else who was around her.
So the question buzzing across the news was why? Why would Brittany Norwood, a former soccer star and someone who seemed to have her life pretty put together, want to murder someone so violently? The answer was revealed months later in court, and while there are no good reasons to brutally murder someone, Brittany's reason was especially horrible: yoga pants. There had been reports of someone stealing Lululemon merchandise in the weeks prior to the murder, so Lulu leaders were checking bags at the end of everyone's shift, and sure enough, Brittany had a pair in her bag with no receipt. Brittany, being the liar that she is, said a manager approved the sale, but there was no record of the transaction. Knowing she couldn't lie her way out of this one, Brittany took a different course of action and decided to lure Jayna back to the store and silence her forever, not knowing that Jayna had already reported the theft. After luring Jayna back to the Lululemon, Brittany beat, dragged, and stabbed her to death using 5 different weapons found in a toolbox next to Jayna's body, including a wrench, a hammer, a peg used for mannequins, an iron bar used for shelving, and a knife, which dealt the fatal blow to the back of her head, severing her spinal cord. Jayna was alive for every blow that was dealt, a fact the judge reminded Brittany of when he sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole, as he pounded his fist on the table 330 times, representing every chance Brittany had to stop the attack. Jayna was loved and continues to be remembered by her family. If you'd like to donate to the Jayna Troxel Murray Foundation or see the full video of Jayna's bungee adventure, then please use the links I left in the description. As always, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. What part of this case hits you hardest? Was it the violence of Brittany Norwood, the callous indifference of the Apple employees, or was it heart-wrenching sympathy for Jayna and the Troxel Murray family? Thanks for watching, and as always, until next time.